clinical recommendations. So this is me. The first line is important here. I don't have any formal training in programming. You may be wondering, well, why are you giving this presentation? Well, there are two other webinars that Karen mentioned earlier. Wayne Karanen, who basically, along with his team, invented this thing, he did a webinar, and Rex Carden, who has done a lot of really advanced work early on with scripting and has published his own APIs. He's also done a webinar. So those are sort of your expert views, and I'm here to provide sort of a beginner's guide by a beginner. So I want to show you sort of what it takes to get started and what cool things you can do even if you don't have a big programming background. So I've been doing medical physics for about 6 years, and I work at Cone Health, which is a community hospital with no academic affiliation. So this is all done directly to help our patients. It's mostly not for real academic research purposes. We do some clinical research here, but we treat 200 patients a day, and so we're a busy clinic, and we still find time to do this because we're so excited about it. So let's get into it. The purpose of this webinar, you may be asking yourself, why script at all? If you're here, you probably think it might be something you're interested in. I think it puts valuable information at our fingertips. It can decrease errors and increase speed at the same time because we're utilizing the computers that can actually, basically do the same thing every time without making mistakes. We want to have more users doing this so that we have more development. So even if you're a physicist, a dosimetrist, a therapist, this is something that you can pick up and can maybe change your daily workflow. Also, it makes us more valuable as part of our RADONC teams. It's becoming more and more important to be able to influence the electronic side, the automation side of things. So what do I want to cover specifically in this talk? Some of the necessary background so that we're all speaking in C# by the end of this. How to explore a SAPI, because I think it's important when you're getting started to know how to get around and how to maybe come up with your own ideas, and also go over a practical example. And we're going to do that from scratch so that we can all follow the same line of thought all the way through together. I think that's important because sometimes you can look at already written code and it looks like Latin because it's somebody else's fully formed thought. We're gonna sit down and we're gonna start from scratch and we're gonna think through the whole thing together. And so I want to prepare you when you're starting on your coding journey. There's a few stages that are pretty common, and I want to prepare you for, so maybe we can handle them well. At the introduction of a new language like this, you can get really interested and inspired maybe, and that may carry you for a little while, but eventually there might be a realization that, wow, this is really complicated stuff, and I don't know if I know everything I need to know yet, and you might enter this sort of valley of despair. I know I have, where you're just not sure if you can do anything with this. But with some little victories, and hopefully we're going to find some little victories today, you can maybe make some powerful changes in your department. And really, the fallacy that keeps you down in that valley of despair is that I don't know enough or I don't have that formal training, when in reality, nobody knows all of this stuff. Nobody holds all of it in their brain, and really there are some techniques that you can use to get through that. So I want to set the stage first. The status quo in most departments is life without scripting. We fondly call it in our clinic Eclipse. I have to credit the dosimetrists that I work with that were training me when I first started with Eclipse. And they demonstrated sort of how to start planning, how to do things, and Eclipse is a name they came up with, and it was pretty hilarious, so it stuck with me. But it really illustrates what the daily life is like with Eclipse, which can lead to people making mistakes, having to do mundane and repetitive tasks over and over and over again, and then maybe not doing something correctly the first time and needing to do a do-over or a reprint or something. That can lead to inaccurate information and incomplete tasks, and at worst, some uninformed decisions in the department, which can have real consequences. So there's also the consequence of, maybe there's valuable clinical information out there, but it's out of reach for us. You might want to look up a bunch of information, but man, it just takes forever. So can we escape Eclipse is the logical question. Enter ASAPI. So this Eclipse Scripting Application Programming Interface, or ASAPI, is really a great tool, and the key word there is interface. This gives us access under the hood so that we can customize Eclipse to our needs. The sort of how to get started, the real basis of it is you don't need any formal training. And I want to emphasize that a lot. I don't have any formal training. Others in our department don't have formal training. And yet, yes, there's more and more classes that are being offered out there, but really what it takes is a few steps and you can get going. So your service engineer can install the API. They typically do it on a FAT client, and it includes all of the library files and especially the Eclipse Scripting Wizard that really can get you jump-started. The thing you'll need after that is a testing environment. Visual Studio is a Microsoft product. It's an integrated development environment, which means that it can do everything from coding to spell checking your code in real time to actually building it and testing it all right there in one environment. So we recommend doing that. And there's a free version out there for the community. So let's jump right into a practical overview of C#. And I just want to emphasize first off that don't worry about if you don't pick up all of this on the first go-round. It's taken me a while for it to really sink in, but I'm going to move fast just so that we can get to the real examples. So C# is a simple and modern programming language, and the big thing there is it's object-oriented. It uses the .NET framework, which is basically it's a code base that Microsoft supports and allows you to sort of stand on their shoulders and not have to do everything from scratch, and you can pick up sort of common things from them. And the fact that it's object-oriented, you may not have heard that phrase before. Basically, that means your code can be flexible and reusable, and it comes in bytes called or units called classes that you can sort of make generic and then reuse in different ways. So I like the example that I've seen that I like is a cookie cutter. A cookie cutter is the class, and then you can actually have, you can use that over and over and over again to make all of your cookies. That's kind of how object-oriented programming works. So just to go into a little more detail with classes, classes are groups of related methods and properties, which sort of group of related code, if you want to think of it that way, that when you call it, you get access to all of its contents. And a class in sort of this context can be thought of kind of as a car. Cars have, it's one unit, but it has different elements to it. It has properties. It has wheels. It has doors. It has a steering wheel. It has mirrors. Those are the properties of the car. But it also has actions that it can perform. You can push the gas pedal. You can turn on the stereo. You can pop the trunk. Those are the methods. Those are the actions that the car can do. And so I like that example a lot and sort of holding that in my brain as I'm coding. Methods, like I said, are the action. They take arguments. So it may be that there's something about the car. You turn on the stereo, but you can turn on the radio or the CD player. It takes inputs to actually get more specific. And it can be repeated over and over again with different inputs maybe. That's called an overload. Oh, and if I haven't already mentioned it before, The things that are underlined in this presentation are the things that are actually important and that might be on the quiz later. So if you're taking notes, that might be helpful to you. So overloads are repeated methods that have the same name but different inputs. So like turn on stereo may have an input that says CD player, radio, things like that. And a good example in SAPI is a plan versus a plan sum. All right, so you also, another thing about C# is it has logic that's built in that's really helpful. If, for each, while, these are all examples of logic and loops that you can use to add intelligence to your code. And nesting of those loops allows for more and more complex scenarios. Let's see. Resources are another thing that is a good buzzword for C#. Resources are other code that you bring into your project that you can build on. It is included code that you build on. So an example of that is the variant code that we're going to bring in and we're going to build off of later. Keywords are another sort of thing that you'll see in C# where there are protected words that have special meaning, and they're sort of just do not touch. You can't change the meaning of these words. So things like that would be public, string, or int, short for integer. Those things are locked in, and you can't change them. They're called keywords. So now let's skip, with that little basis in C# over to Eclipse scripting. Eclipse, just think of it as Eclipse if you only had a keyboard. The current limitation is that it's read-only, so you can only pull information out. So a lot of the projects that you'll see going around are things that you can pull the information out and analyze and then give the user some feedback. Everything starts with an ID number in Eclipse scripting. So you use the ID number to call the patient up and get started. So each patient then sort of cascades down and has courses, studies, registrations, structure sets. You know all of this from working in Eclipse on a daily basis, that it filters out into different areas, and Eclipse is designed to mimic that in the background. So I want to quickly show you, this is a typical phrase. It's actually the first phrase that we're going to write when we start coding in a few minutes. It is a normal sort of Eclipse scripting opening line in C#. And I'm just going to break down the different elements of it real quick so that we can know that together, and when I'm typing it later, you can refer back to something like this. So the first thing you'll see, starting from left to right, is there is a green lettering or bluish lettering there called a class type. So in this case, we're calling a class that's already built within Variant called a patient. And then we're actually giving it a name. So in our code, we're going to refer to that instance of the class as just lowercase patient. And then we're going to assign it a value. So that's with the equal signs, and that's pretty intuitive. And then we have a local variable called app. That's another class that we are digging into. And the dot there is important because it separates all of your initial code with the members of that class that we're calling. And there's a method involved in the app class called openPatientById. So think of that as opening Eclipse and then opening the patient by an ID. And that method, like we talked about before, takes an argument. And that argument is the medical record number. And then we end the statement by closing parentheses, closing the quotes, and adding a semicolon. So this is a typical statement. Again, don't worry too much if that was over your head right now. It'll become clearer as you get some experience. So how is that useful? So we start with a diagram. This is a diagram of a reference guide in the API. And that openPatientById, it sets up your patient. And say we want to get over and get some beam information. You'll see the beam in the sort of the lower right-hand side as one of the different objects that we can call. Well, we can't jump right straight to it. So, as with normal Eclipse we sort of work our way down by adding code that mimics the clicks that you would use in an Eclipse full version. So eventually you can add that and you can get to the information you want, like maybe an MU or a beam angle. And we're going to do that together. So Variant provides a really easy way to jumpstart yourself into getting some of that code down. You use the scripting wizard, and there are a few flavors of that. There's a single file plugin and a standalone executable, and they're used for sort of different purposes. The single file plugin, if you're choosing between the two, is something that is run in the Eclipse scripting application. So it's what your end users might use to repeat some of this code that you're creating for them. And then the standalone code or the standalone project is something that opens in the background, and it's actually an invisible version of Eclipse that you can run, and you can actually stop while your code is running and debug it. So that's usually where I start coding in the standalone version, and then I sort of go back to a plugin to hand it off to some people that I work with. So with no further ado, let's try to write some code together. All right. So one easy project that we can do together that I think is pretty easy but also pretty helpful is writing a DVH analysis tool. So what I'm going to do to start that is I have an anonymous patient here, and I have some DVH goals that we use in our department, and we're going to launch an Eclipse application. So like I said before, using the standalone is really helpful because you can stop and debug as you're going. So I'm going to name this script and we're going to create a project just like that using the Eclipse Scripting Wizard. All right, and while it's doing that, so this is sort of the basic Visual Studio screen. See, it even launched it for me. And over on the right-hand side here is our C# code. You see we have a .cs file, and this whole area over on the right maps out your project and the files that you're using. So I have this C# file that we're going to write in, and it also has references here. So these are the code bases that we're sort of launching from. And you can see here there's two that are labeled VMS. It's a little small there, but I can't really make this any bigger, I don't think. But VMS and then .api down here at the end, that's what we use mostly here, but both of these libraries are available to us. So as we move to the left into our actual code, this is sort of the basic code that is going to launch from the Eclipse Scripting Wizard, and it's going to have these using statements up here that are going to reference or sort of call the different references that we're going to use in our code, and you can see VMS TPS blah 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 API is one of the things that we're going to launch off of. And this sort of first section of code here, you can kind of ignore it. It's all been done for you. But you can see down here, this text in green actually says, add your code here. So that's exactly what we're going to do. These double slashes right here indicate that something is a comment, meaning that it's not going to be code that's run. It's going to be actually just notes that you can annotate your project with. So I'm just going to delete that, and we are going to get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write that line that we looked at earlier. And right off the bat, you can see that things are starting to fill in for me. I'm going to zoom back in so that you can see better. So as I type, I'm getting suggestions from what's called IntelliSense. It's a feature in Visual Studio, and it's giving me suggestions. So it's saying, oh, this is a VMS, patient is a VMS API class that you're trying to call, isn't it? And as I get further along, it filters down and does that work for me of suggesting something. So as you're going along, if you're typing, you can really just let the system help you out, and that's really useful. So you can see right here, the first thing we have is we open the application. So I'm going to just type in app, and I add a dot here to look in its members. And there's a whole list of things that are actually written already for us in the app code and gives us access to things that we might want to do. So if I just start typing again, I know open patient by ID is one of the things that is there. I can just hit enter and it fills in. So these things are really useful that it's showing me sort of what it wants so that I can actually do it correctly. All of this could really be done in a text editor, but these features make it really easy for beginners to get going with this code. So I have a test patient here that I'm going to add its username. And just like that, we have executable code that can open up a patient and we can explore it from there. So I am going to write out sort of the next thing you would, in a natural C# or in a natural Eclipse environment, you would open up a patient and then you would open up a course. So I'm going to open up a course. And then my variable for this project is just going to be called course. And it's an element of my patient. And I'm going to look at the courses that it has. Well, in lots of patients, there's multiple courses. So I'm going to write a little statement here that you can just copy down. Don't worry about knowing exactly what it means. But basically what it's going to do is it's going to look through the courses, and when it finds something that matches what I'm going to give it, it is going to stop and return that into our project. So my course is called C1, and I only want to return one thing. So there you go. We're going to look for a course in my patient in the list of courses where the value of the course ID is equal to C1. And this little statement right here, this is a logical statement with two equal signs. Two equal signs means that it's going to check and see if this on the left equals this on the right and gives us true or false in the end. So if we put in C2 and then there's no C2, this will be false and it won't select the course. And you use a lot of logic statements like that as you're going through in C#. All right, so now let's open up a plan. Plans in Eclipse Scripting are called plan setup. So I'm going to open up a plan setup within course. And I might have two plans, so I'm going to, again, look the same way at the list of plan setups and just sort of do that same code over again. And my plan is called Plan 1. So, boom, there you go. We have now opened up a plan from a course from a patient. And let's just run that real quick to make sure that it works. So this is the benefit of running in a standalone, is that I can actually pause it before it finishes. This little red dot clicked out here on the sort of left bar is called a breakpoint. And I can start my code up here, which will build it, run it, open the application, and stop when it gets to that breakpoint, if it gets that far. If you sort of error out or something's wrong, it'll stop before it gets there. And this little arrow, yellow arrow, indicates that we got to our code. There's a few other tools that are really helpful. One is called autos. If you look in this debug section under Windows, there's a section called autos. And what that does is it just shows you the elements of what you're working with in your code where you've paused it. So right now I have instituted a plan, and if you can see over here, it's called Plan 1. And I can even drop this down and look at all of the different properties of that plan and maybe even dig down a little bit deeper and decide, this is how I'm going to pull this information out of the plan. So it's a great way to explore a SAPI without even needing to know everything up front. Maybe I want to search for something in beams, and I see I've got 3 beams. They're labeled field 1, 2, 3. So that's really helpful in sort of exploring, which I think really gets you going. So I'm going to get back into this, and we are going to continue to try to do our DVH analysis. So the next thing that we're going to want to do in a DVH analysis is find a structure. So I am going to institute a structure class. And again, this is the variant version of it. And I'm going to call, because we're doing this on a thorax patient, I am going to look at my list here, and I'll just go from the first one. Our normal lung constraint is V20 is going to be less than 35%. So let's see if we met that criteria with this patient. So my structure is going to be a lung, and I've got to pick that out of my plan. So plan has a series of structure sets associated with it. And within that structure set, there are structures. And within that, there may be multiple structures. So I'm going to do another one of these statements up here where I search through the list, and when it matches the ID that I want, I am going to kick it out and use that. So let's see if that works. Now, what's going to happen is I'm going to run the code, and when it gets to that line, right before it runs, it'll hit the breakpoint and stop, and then I'll hit continue, and it'll go to the next line. And if it works correctly, it'll get to the second breakpoint, and we'll see what's going on. All right, so see, I'm at structure, but I haven't run this line yet, and I'm going to hit continue to go to the next line, and it breaks. So there's a problem here. Let's see if we can figure out what it is. So this is normal for when you're coding something. You may end up thinking something's going to work, and then it doesn't. Well, let's see if we can figure out why. So here I've got my structures that I'm looking at, and if I drop down to the results, I can look at the actual list of the patient that I'm working on. And you can see down here I have something called lungs minus ITV. So in my statement up here, I said I want the ID to equal lung. Well, it doesn't equal lung. There's a capital L here, and there's an S-ITV, so I need to make my statement more flexible. So what I can do is there's lots of other little tools that you can do to change this. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to make everything lowercase. So there's a function called toLower, which will make everything lowercase. And that's a method, so it's going to operate on that ID, and I need parentheses to close that method. And then I also want to find something that contains lung that doesn't actually equal lung. So let me delete these equal signs and write contains. That's another method. And so it's going to look and see if a string contains lung. And we'll run that and see if we get to our breakpoint. Great. So we got to our breakpoint, and you can see lung, the variable here, has a value of lung minus ITV. And so we can keep going. That works now. So now let's look at how do we get the dose to this function. Well, the dose is housed in the plan. So we are going to look at the variant API real quick, which is very helpful for figuring out what's available to you. So I'm just going to open the variant Eclipse Scripting API help and look through their lists here. So this is a list of all of the classes that they make available to you. I'm going to scroll down to plan setup, which is what we're using. And there's a whole list of methods. And in those methods, there's get dose at volume, and there's get volume at dose. And we're going to use get volume at dose since we're looking at the V20 gray for lung. So this is a little description that you'll see. It says public double get volume at dose. And what that means is it's a method that's public, meaning we can use it, and it's going to return a double. A double is a type of number in C#. It's another one of those keywords. And then this get volume at dose is the variant method name that we're going to call, and it takes this argument, which is three things: a structure, a dose value, and a volume presentation. So we're going to write our code in that format, and we're going to get a double out. So let's go ahead and institute a double. And you can see the different colors here. These green things are classes. These blue things are keywords, and these orange things are strings, and everything else is just sort of your code. So I am going to pull out the lung dose, and I'm going to use the plan and use the get volume at dose method. And I've got to pass it a structure. Well, we've already looked that up, and we've called it lung. And then it asks for a dose value, if you can see here. I haven't set that up yet. So I'm going to back up, and I'm going to set up a dose value, which is another class that Varian provides. And we're just going to call this lung goal. And we're going to make a new instance of it, and it's going to have a few things in it. Now you can see this little bar that comes up below is giving me options of how to set up my new dose goal. And if I scroll through, these are overloads. So there are 3 overloads to dose value, and one of them is a double and a unit. So I'm going to type in my dose, which is going to be 20 gray, and I'm going to give it a dose value. In gray, and close that off. And now I can use this lung goal in my phrase here, and then it wants a volume presentation. So you can see it's already suggesting things that I might want to use. I didn't even have to type volume presentation. We want it in relative because we're going to look at the percent of the lung that's been treated. So boom, there we go. We have hopefully a dose value or a volume value at a certain dose. Now, to present this to our users, it's helpful to set up something that will maybe pop up and give them the information that we've just found, and maybe evaluate it to see if it's good or not. So let's try that. I'm going to start by setting up a string, which is just text, and a dose summary is what we'll call it. And I'm just going to leave it blank right now. We're just going to sort of institute it. And what we want to do is then set up an if statement to evaluate if the dose is good, give us this message. If it's not, give us a different message. So one of the things, maybe you are new and you've forgotten how to write an if statement. Well, that's where Google comes in. I highly encourage you to search things because you could have a textbook, but really there's so much available to you just with search these days. So I like to type blah, 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 something C#. And usually I get several things right up front. MSDN is Microsoft Developers Network, and that's basically the help guide from Microsoft for all of their code in C#. And then you might get other different organizations down here that are helpful. So I'm just going to click on that, and here it first thing gives me what an if statement is and how to write it. So let's try that. I need an if, and then parentheses, my condition, another parentheses, curly brackets, and my statement. And this variable is set to true. That's what's going to happen if my condition is true. So let's write out an if statement. So if, and now we have that parentheses, my lung dose is greater than my lung goal. That's not good. So you can see here, this is already giving me a little bit of an error. Again, this is normal as you're going through your code. it says operator blank or open greater than sign cannot be applied to operands of different type. So it looks like we have a double and a dose value. Well, that makes sense if I look up here. These are two different types. So what I need to do is I need to convert them both to the same type. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert lung goal to dose, which is a double. You can see that out there to the side. So now it's happy. No squiggly red lines. So I'm going to keep going, and if it's over, if the lung dose is too high, I'm going to find my dose summary, and I am going to add, plus equals is going to operate on the string called dose summary and add the text to the end, whatever it is. So lung dose is too high. And I'm going to, because I know this is the V20, I'm going to say the V20 is equal to the actual dose. So I'm going to look at, I know I need to round this, so there's actually a whole math suite within C# that you can use. So I'm going to do math.round. And that is going to give me several overloads, and I can scroll through them here. Okay, I need a number 5 is a double value and the number of digits that I want to round to, and it gives a little description. How nice is that? So I'm going to give my actual lung dose that we looked up, and I'm going to give it a 2 decimal place value, and I'm going to convert that whole thing to a string so that it's happy, everything's the same type, and then I'm going to add a parentheses at the end. And that should give us our statement if the lung dose is too high. Now we're going to write our else statement. So if the lung dose is less than, that's going to return false. And we can say lung dose, it's okay. Cool. And that's it. So now all we have to do is present our string that we've now created, and that can be done with another Windows default thing called Windows message box .show, and I'm just going to type in dose summary. So now that's going to show the text string that we've generated with this message box. So let's go ahead and see if that works. All right. Boom. Lung dose is too high. The V20 is 35.45 for this patient. And we can open up our John Doe patient and look, and the V20, let's see, is that the right thing? I need absolute dose. So 20 gray is 35.4. So there you go. With just that little bit of work, we've now done an actual dose checker. But like I was saying before, let's not stop there. That is, I'm going to have to rewrite all of this code every single time if I want to add even one more constraint to the lung. So let's use the concepts of methods to make this a little more generic and maybe use it over again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another method outside of this sort of initial method. It's going to start with public, static, and then what I want it to output. I want it to output a string. And I'm just going to give it a generic name, evaluate structure dose. And what do I need to use to get that to work? Well, I used a plan setup, and we'll just call that a plan. I used a string called, which would be the structure name. I used a double for the eval dose. That would be 20 gray. And then there was another double that we used called, that was the goal volume, so what we're evaluating against. All right, so open that up. and it's already not happy, and that's because I told it I'm going to give it a string when we're done, and I haven't done that yet. So let's just give it a dose summary. And every time we do this, we want a new line. So I'm going to change this to a new line. But I've forgotten what new line is, so I'm going to Google it. All right, if I just Google string new line C#, the first thing that comes up is Stack Overflow. And this is a great website. It's sort of like a community-based question and answer session. So this person asked about adding a space, and this person answered and got 324 upvotes. So it's probably pretty trustworthy. And I can look in here, and I can just copy and paste that in. And every time I run this method, it'll generate a new line. I'm going to return the dose site summary at the end. That's my string that's going to come out, and now it's happy again. All right, let's keep rolling. So all of this code that I've already done up here, we want to basically use it again, but in a more generic way. So I'm just going to copy it in here and start changing things around so that we can make it more generic. So instead of the structure being lung, I'm just going to call that ST. And instead of this being the string that we search every time, I'm going to make that the name. That's the thing that will go, whatever we enter second in the method will come here and be entered into this statement. Instead of lung goal, let's see, instead of 20 gray every time, we're going to do the eval dose. And we'll just call this volume goal. And that is going to then be put into here, our volume goal, and it's going to be evaluated at our structure. And this will be, let's call this actual dose. All right, we've already instituted our string here, so let's delete that. And now we want to compare the if the actual dose is higher than the, or let's call this actual volume, sorry. If actual volume is higher than our volume goal, then it's too high. So let's put in the structure that we actually come back with here. So I'm going to do the structure.id. And then, so the ID of the structure dose is too high. And maybe it's not a V20, maybe it is whatever the eval dose is. And I'm going to make sure that's a string. So the V whatever is equal to the actual vol. All right, and that's going to be a %. So there we go. We have now a generic statement. And if you didn't catch all that, don't worry. You can look at this again later. I am going to paste that again down here and then just change my message. Dose again is OK. And then everything's good. So now we have a generic method that we can rework. And so let's delete all of this code that we did before and try this again. So now instead of writing all that code every time, I still need to institute my dose site summary. That's why it's not happy there. I deleted too much. And let's call the method that we have. So evaluate structure dose is the method that we just listed. And it is going to take a plan, which we have called plan again. Then we're going to do the name of the structure, which is lung. So we're going to just do the same one that we've done before. So it's going to be the eval dose at 20 gray, and the volume goal is 35. And we know that's going to output a string that we want to tack on to the dose summary. So I'm just going to tack that on just like that. And while we're at it, let's repeat it a couple times. Oh, and I forgot the D. All right, so we're going to repeat this method for the other dose goals that we have in our list here. So this is more valuable. So we're going to do lung twice, and it's going to be the 5 gray dose has got to be less than 55. Then maybe we're going to skip down and do the heart, and the heart dose, the 60 gray has got to be less than 33%. The 45 gray is going to be less than 66, and make sure that's the heart. And the last one there is the 40 gray is less than 100. So let's run this and see if we met these criteria. And there we go. Heart dose is okay for all, and the lung looks like it's slightly high on both accounts. So there you go. We've done a dose checker, and all you have to do now that we are happy with our code to convert it to a plugin is launch another Eclipse Script Wizard single file plugin. I'll just call it plugin webinar. And it's really easy to change this. Instead of pulling up each single one of the courses or the plans, what we're going to use instead is called the context. So I'm just going to take the solution that I start with. This is, again, the default solution here for a plugin that's just inputted for us. I'm going to copy all of my code and insert it in here. And the only thing that it doesn't like right off the bat is this app, because we didn't call an app. We're going to use the context instead. See here, script context. So that's going to take the context of the user that is using this, and it's going to use what they already have instead of making them type it in to the C# code. So I'm just going to save that to the desktop real quick, and we're going to run it from inside the typical GUI. And you can see here on the desktop I have plugin_webinar, which I just created, and you run it and you get the same information. So I've gone from nothing to now having a working dose checker script without too much effort. And all of that hopefully follows logically for you. And for the sake of time, I'm going to jump back in and finish up my slides. So as you can see, you've got to work through problems when you're doing this code, but there's no new problems out there. That's the beauty of it. With tools like search, you can Google things. You can use Stack Overflow to see what communities have come up with as best solutions, and you can sort of use the collective knowledge out there to your advantage. Resources are really great, such as the Eclipse Scripting Reference Guides, which we peeked into, and the MSDN, which are sort of they're almost like the dictionaries for how to use this language. And then networking is great. So CodePlex is a site that Varian has a sort of environment in, and they share code there, fully formed code, and you can actually ask questions. There are forums there with users that are specific to Varian. Training and meetings are great places to meet sort of people who are also working in this environment. And just real quick, I wanted to share some of the things that we've been able to accomplish with this at Cone Health. We've done dose checkers like you just saw. We've done full plan checkers, so we check and see if naming and things are right. File movers, document generation, and event listeners, and even patient lists that we can pull up all the patients of a certain type. More cool things that you'll see in other presentations and in other institutions are collision avoidance, data mining for research, automated planning, And in the future, what we're really excited about is in 15.1.1, there's going to be a little bit more, such as view rendering, which uses the Eclipse engines to generate pictures for you that you could drop in to reports and things like that, or automation tools that will actually let you save back to the database, hopefully making it a little more than read-only in the future. And then here are a few more underlined things for you to look at. Few things that are important to keep sort of some best practices. We subversion things in our department, which is really helpful. You know, when you get a working version, save it. It helps you sort of walk back when you break something to say, I can't figure out what happened. Well, let me go back to an earlier version. Testing it before you release it to your team. And here's some of the subversioning tools, what they look like. You can work simultaneously with people with things like Tortoise SVN and Team Foundation Server to develop all at the same time and not conflict with one another. And then documentation is really important. What if I get hit by a bus? What is the clinic going to do? So versioning, testing, and documentation are really important for best practices. And then also commenting is really great. Remember, the 2 forward slashes are things that help you go back and when you're reading your code say, man, what was I thinking when I wrote this way? Oh, here's some comments that help me get on my train of thought. So just to conclude, we are now mostly limited by our imaginations, which is kind of awesome and kind of scary. And I hope this presentation has sort of piqued